Welcome in. Happy Friday. Happy Blue Friday. My name is Danny McCafferty. I get to host tonight. That'll be fun. Yes. To my left is Casey Wilson.
I'm raw and ready.
Oh, gosh. Please don't be. And across the table, not Ron Bergen.
I am present.
It's Nathan James.
I am here with a nice bass, deep baritone vibe today.
Music people. All right. Well, it's not like the Seahawks have done anything recently, so we don't have anything to discuss. So we're going to cut short tonight. We are recording this on, what day is today? March something?
14th.
March 14th.
14th.
And so
Pie Day. It's
here's
Pie
the
Day.
issue. It is Pie Day.
Have you guys had your pie?
We didn't even plan on pie.
I actually have pie that's been in the freezer for at least 3 months. Additionally, I have a hot dog I caught from Pete Carroll that's been there for 4 years.
I tried to give mine to Salk. You rejected
I feel
me.
like all of this I'm going to edit out at some
It was
point.
a bad choice.
Milk was a bad choice.
Lemon meringue's my favorite.
So tonight, let's kick off with some recap of all the things that have happened recently. We'll do a bunch of different things tonight. Let's lead off with just what has happened before we get into what will happen. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. We'll dive into it. We'll get different reactions. Nathan is going to be our emotional Seahawks fan tonight. Casey, as always, approaches things from the health and actual player
Wellness.
concern. Yeah, wellness.
That's a good word.
And I'm just the resident nerd, so off we go. Casey, as you reflect on these last chunk of times, let's start at the very beginning. We hear news that DK Metcalf wants a trade. What goes through your head? What did you think would happen at that point?
That I thought we would trade DK Metcalf.
You thought it would happen immediately.
I thought it would.
A plus B equals C.
Yes. I definitely think, we saw it pretty relevant in John Schneider's most recent interviews. It just seems like ever since Pete has left, we're seeing more and more of his personality come out, and he's not going to tolerate people that don't want to be here and not pay kind of overinflated contracts that I don't think DK, not necessarily that he hasn't played his worth, but out of the top non-quarterback contracts, he's at number 6 in the league right now at $33 million a year. That's considering, I think, 3 wide receivers and then 3 defensive linemen, I believe, including Myles Garrett's new contract.
Which was massive and record-breaking.
And Chase is about to probably break that. And it's
And T. Higgins.
Yeah, and T. Higgins.
Oh, man.
Well,
$80
Apparently they're
million.
represented by the same agent?
Yep.
It's weird.
Wild.
But bottom line is, I get that. And I honestly think, too, DK probably shut them down in the sense of these contract talks, too. So he probably just wanted a change, too. And with that, we're probably going to discuss more with Geno. If DK's gone, I don't see Geno really having that same level of success as he was having with DK over the last couple of years. And I think that's what led to these decisions.
So, Nathan, and again, this idea, we've talked about it many times. We've just been talking ball nonstop for the last week and a half. And the thing that stuck out was DK requested a trade first. Geno gets traded first. Okay, so the order of operations is going on, and it's a little askew from what maybe we would have thought originally. How do you think things went behind the scenes? We've heard some reports, we've read some reports, we've seen the Condota, articles, we've followed along with Brian Nemhauser, we've followed along with all the guys. So, what do you think? What's the A leads to B leads to C thing you were talking about?
Ooh, that's tough to know exactly what came first in the order of operations, but absolutely DK and Geno, they have an effect on each other. And so they are talking on some level about, hey, Pete's back in the league, or, hey, I'm looking at this number. What do you think the Hawks are actually going to meet me? I don't know. But that definitely played into it. But I think John Schneider had some interesting comments, too, about saying we want people who want to be here, basically. And so we've been talking for a while about how John Schneider has been working with Pete Carroll, under Pete Carroll, whatever. And last year was such a whirlwind. I mean, the coaching staff was not even at the combine. It feels like John Schneider just made a bunch of decisions. Like, I think this is what Mike McDonald wants. They turned out to be pretty much all not what he wanted, as he cut all the linebackers. So this feels like more lockstep of like, I do believe they wanted Geno back, but it was at a specific number. And so coming into free agency, they knew pretty quick here, okay, this is the number we're looking for Geno, and we're not close. So this is going to take some time.
Yeah.
We're just going to pivot right away. There is that tampering rule with the NFL. We all know all the GMs are violating it every year. There's the legal tampering, the illegal. So discussions had to have happened behind, whatever burner phone he's using, whatever's happening.
So we know that the discussions are happening.
The discussions are happening.
How much of a plan B, how much of a pivot do you think this was?
I don't think it was a giant pivot. I do believe them when they say they wanted Geno, but they wanted Geno at what they offered. Like $40 million. We think this is the best you're going to get in the league. People are not going to offer you. And before Pete came back in, I do think that was probably true. I do think Pete going to the Raiders did change things. So they thought, okay, like this is our number and you want 45. Nope. Like the discussions did not go far. They have negotiated several times now. And it's pretty standard, I would expect, that they would come in saying, hey, here's 35, here's 40, if that's what, is reported to have been offered. And then Geno's camp's going to say, no, I want 45. And there's going to, that back and forth will come.
Do you think that there's an element of DK and Geno are communicating, they know John Schneider's boundaries, they see Pete's back in the league, and so that's your A plus B equals C over time, that it naturally had to lead here? Or was there in-between negotiation, you think, that was like, no, Schneider could have compromised more and made this happen?
Yeah, I see it a little more isolated than that. I think there was conversation between the two of them, Geno and DK, but at the end of the day, I think the business moves, this is a business, that whole mentality is really what's there. DK is 27, coming into a contract, and he's going to try and maximize his money, basically. And that's what it came down to, in my opinion.
Well, it seems like the conversations were pretty short between Geno and JS. And that's the thing, ultimately. Geno didn't seem like he wanted to be here long-term even, or relatively even short-term, because it seems like we're going to draft a quarterback. Reading the tea leaves, and I don't think Geno wants that position of, I'm probably just going to be around for one more year.
Yeah.
Realistically.
So John Schneider is traditionally, we know this, we've followed him for years and years, that he'll give big contracts, but those contracts always have outs after a couple of years. They will never hamstring the team forever.
No.
They may have a negative repercussion the next year, but it's not going to be a forever albatross. So we think about it. We'll pose the question we were talking about earlier. What do you think? Would you rather have DK and Geno at that $75 million a year kind of combined cap cost? We're ballparking here.
Yeah.
Give or take, whatever. Or what ended up happening, would you rather have the Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp at the advanced age and stage with the second and third for ballparking again? We don't know all the guaranteed numbers, but like 48-ish million a year with those two guys combined. Which one did you end up saying you would land on, one of those two sides?
I think there's kind of 2 points to go along with that. I think one, have you been happy with the last 2 years with Geno and DK? And two, if we signed Geno and DK to that value, would we have been able to afford any additional help on the offensive line, which is the old adage that we've been beating against the doors for the last decade, fix this O-line, and we're still saying that right now. We have money to do that now, and they're choosing to look at some other prospects. So I believe that if they do fix this O-line with that cheaper amount, that absolutely Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp at the value that they're at, plus the additional draft capital, is the way to go, ultimately. I don't think we would have been able to afford any of the real top free agents, which they haven't spent on, but maybe even, getting Jenkins, getting Bradbury at center. I don't think these would even be options at that point if we did sign Geno and DK.
So let's toss it to you as well, right? Idea is, and these are not direct comparisons. We know, right? It's not that these two moves, this quarterback wide receiver, is the exact same as this quarterback wide receiver in comps, right? Because you didn't sign these guys, you were also able to sign these guys. You were also able to do other things, whatever. It also would have changed all the other moves we made. But in the vacuum, for the value they were at, would you rather have had or have DK and Geno at $75 million-ish a year, or Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp, a second and a third at $48 million a year-ish?
Yeah, there's no chance I'm taking the Geno DK combo for that price. I think the big reason the three of us have really liked Geno and been kind of a defender of him over the years is that he did present tremendous value for the team. This is a quarterback that can at times be a top 10 quarterback, right? And he was not getting paid like that.
Yeah.
Now he's getting paid more appropriately, right? And so the value is no longer there. The value is actually in Sam Darnold. Like, my preference is still to have them to draft a quarterback, no question, in addition to the signing. But no, there's no way I make that deal. And a lot of it has to do with just, I mean, you got to pay the quarterback on some level. That's just what's going to happen. The quarterback, they're expensive. They just are. Do you have to pay the wide receivers, though? I don't think you do. I mean, to have DK Metcalf, you do, clearly.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. That's a position where you can draft. You can draft multiple a year. You can draft cheap. You can sign cheap. You don't have to pay for a wide receiver in the same way they have to do quarterback. So, yeah, no question I'm taking the bargain there. I'm taking the picks.
I feel like the value proposition is something we all talk about frequently.
Yeah.
Right? Like, as well as others in our chains, right? Like, we talk about, discuss, debate value propositions. Is this a good value for the team? And so maybe we just tag on to that. Let's talk about the other moves, because there were a bunch of other moves. Yes. Specifically, we signed Sam Darnold. Was the immediate reaction, yes, good, it's a value, good, it's a bridge, good, it's what Geno was, but it's cheaper? Like, where were you at?
Well, Baker Mayfield is where it comes to. It's like, I think of Baker Mayfield, he's with the Bucs. He's not really a team I follow super closely. He's not a name that I get super excited for, like, oh, it's Baker. He's a pretty good quarterback. He's a playoff quarterback. Like, I have no problem with Baker. Is he a top 10 guy? No, he's not, in my opinion. So that's kind of where it falls for me, is that Sam Darnold's kind of in that similar spot. Like, has he earned this money? Yeah, he absolutely has. He had a really good year. 14 wins is nothing to laugh at. Did they stutter at the end? Sure, like, absolutely. But it's just one of those things. He's a younger guy. He probably hasn't reached his peak, so there is a higher ceiling that's there potentially. And the reality is, these moves are not happening if the Seahawks made 11 or 12 wins last year. It's not happening. You're paying DK. You're bringing back Geno. Whatever's working, you're doing. Mike's first year, he got 10 wins, which is pretty remarkable. But we just see it like so many times that when a new head coach comes in, he has what he has. He has the quarterback. He has the team. You can only do so much in 1 year, right? Yeah. We talk about with Madden, it's like a 3-year rebuild, in my opinion, to really reset a football team. I think that's kind of true in the NFL as well. So, am I happy with Sam Darnold? I don't know if happy is the right word. It's kind of one of those...
Content.
Acceptable. Like, he's an above average quarterback, I think. And he's shown that for 1 year, which I don't love, with a really good situation, quite honestly. But he's also not the quarterback he was before with the Jets. I think it's some of both. Where is he going to lead us to 14 wins this year? I don't think so. But is he also the quarterback he was before? No, he's probably somewhere in between, which is fine. And that does not rule out, or shouldn't rule out, drafting a quarterback of the future.
Does anyone succeed with the Jets?
No.
Okay, good. Thanks. Just wanted to point that out there.
No,
and rub that
I'm
in the
really
face
thinking of
New York
quarterbacks.
Actually, has anyone succeeded with the Giants since...
Eli?
We'll move on. Casey, what was your immediate reaction? Was this a positive, negative, somewhere in between? What was the deal?
I think it was a positive, more so for the Seahawks front office. They got the guy that was on the top of their list. Like, if we were going to pivot from Geno, they did the best possible thing. We got the highest, probably the highest draft capital we could get for Geno. They got the guy that they think.
Thank you, Pete.
Especially with Kubiak now, which, by the way, Kubiak seems to have a lot of influence with especially the Sam Darnold signing. He liked Darnold a lot when they were both on the 49ers a couple of years ago. It seems like Kubiak has some big plans. Kubiak's bringing in his posse. And so that makes me a little bit more encouraged about this situation. However, I think the chance for success is, I guess, a little bit more narrow, given Darnold's only done it for one season, and now he has to learn Kubiak's system. And although these, we see these PFF grades under pressure, Sam Darnold's better than Geno, blah, blah, blah. It just still seems like a common, why do we put our quarterbacks in that situation in the first place? Like, and so I'm like, all right, we got Sam Darnold. That's about my level here.
Yeah, it's good. It's fine. It's wonderful. Do we have that feeling, that residual feeling of, oh man, Geno was an underrated quarterback while he was here. He was an excellent value quarterback while he was here. He was a great bridge quarterback, and we just didn't bridge to anything. And that was frustrating, and maybe that's the frustration of many. And so if the same thing happens with Sam, where we're like, he's good. He's pretty good. He's undervalued. Like he has a higher ceiling, maybe, all these things. But then we never actually do anything with that to bridge to either the guy with the truly elite ceiling. We don't take the big shots. We think, oh, well, maybe he could lead you to the promised land if everything goes right. What do you think the chances are, guys? Just open discussion. What do you think the chances are that we bridge to nothing, we turn into the same Geno situation again?
I mean, I still think with John Schneider, he has to draft a young franchise quarterback. That's something that he has done before. He's done it one time. He's not taken very many risks. It seems like he's kind of risk adverse in some ways, at least at the quarterback position. Drafts Russell Wilson and does the Matt Flynn signing, right? And then Russell blows up as an actual legit franchise, quarterback. I don't know if they expected that. And then the Geno thing, they didn't expect either. Like, they've said that. Pete said that. Like, yeah, we did not expect him to be this good. So it seems like he's kind of struck gold. I mean, you have to strike gold at the quarterback position.
And maybe if I can push a little bit just to see where we go with this, what was the thought process you think when Schneider had Geno and Drew Lock on the roster and he was going into the season? We didn't know what Geno was. And the only look we had was like a couple of games the season before where we were like, yeah, he's competent. Like, and that's all we had. Was that a high risk?
Super high
move,
risk.
And it somehow paid off. So is he really conservative in this decision-making area? Or is it just like, wow, it happened to work out?
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter in that, again, he's gotten these guys where he's not had to draft a quarterback high. That's the point I guess I'm trying to make with the Russell Wilson, is that there is a lot of risk of drafting a quarterback high and having them not work out. And we're seeing right now, who's the Colts starting quarterback? I mean, they have Anthony Richardson.
Daniel Jones.
But they have Daniel Jones, right? And so they're in this weird spot where they have this super young quarterback who's still extremely raw. 49ers trading up, I think, for Trey Lance. They had such a good team that they could absorb that hit, but Brock Purdy's a good quarterback, but they never nailed like a top 5, like really high ceiling quarterback. Yeah. And I think you see the consequences of that. They've gone against Patrick Mahomes twice.
Wouldn't that speak more to the fact that Schneider hasn't traditionally drafted quarterbacks, despite saying he wants to every year, just not taking a shot on a guy on day 2, day 3? Like, outside of Russell Wilson, we know the story. We've heard it a million times. He drafted Russ. Years later, he drafted whatever the kid's name is in the 6th or 7th, right?
Alex
like
something.
Magoo. And that's it.
That's it.
That's the whole draft quarterback classes of Schneider. Like, he's never really taken shots at it. It's not I'm just going to see if this guy works out or see if this guy works out.
Yeah. I feel like it's like alluded to what they kind of talked about a few years ago, where they've always been more drafting on the need basis versus let's take the best player available. And their drafts were not looking great for 6-7 years. And now it's like, okay, we are taking the best players available now, and it's actually working somewhat. To decipher if any of them are true blue chippers, like we're trying to see that for ourselves between Witherspoon, between JSN, between Walker, between Charles Cross. But it goes kind of back to, this philosophy that Schneider and Pete have had of like, we're always competing. Is this a compete now kind of situation with Darnold, with Cooper Kupp, with DeMarcus Lawrence, all these other signings, with keeping Ernest Jones? Like, we're not looking, kind of shifting a little bit to the defense. Like, we have dudes on that defense. We have a top 10 defense, I think. And I'm like, we can't waste that kind of defense.
Well, and this is actually, maybe that's where we should take the conversation for a couple minutes before we break for maybe the future-facing pieces of it. First of all, we should say thank you, Tyler Lockett, for your service. You are
Absolutely.
incredible and amazing, and we appreciate you. And then, Jaron Reed comes back, re-signed. Ernest Jones
3
comes
years.
back, re-signed.
3 years.
3 years, right? Like, all of these are probably 2-year deals with team options at the end if needed, or...
Well, we like Ernest.
Excellent.
Like he's
We do.
a captain type of guy.
He's a dude.
He's a dude we
But-
want around.
This is traditional Schneider move, right? He doesn't sign long-term contracts. The final one is, then he goes and gets DeMarcus Lawrence, he gets Cooper Kupp, he gets MVS,
Yep.
and swing
And a
tackle,
swing
who
tackle.
doesn't matter.
We can't remember his name.
Josh
He's from Baltimore.
Jones.
Josh Jones
Jones,
is,
thank
yeah, it's fine. You need a swing tackle, move on. But that's not a notable signing.
Yeah.
That's just a thing. Each of those moves, or those moves composite, right? Like, take a minute and just tell me the quick thought, the quick reaction.
We need no line.
Okay,
It just
we will evaluate in the next segment, like, where we're at.
Oh, line.
100%. But, like, let's finish what we've done, because
Yeah.
so far he's done that. That's what he's done.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know what he will do, but we know he did this.
Well, I mean, he immediately got a quarterback, which is good.
Yeah.
Like, if we don't, that's what I will say. One thing I'll say is, while I don't necessarily love him as a quarterback, Sam Darnold, is that think of the other teams that do not have a quarterback right now and the position they're in. It's like, okay, so we're not one of those teams.
Yes.
And I feel a lot better about that. I would give him a B right now if we're to grade John Schneider, because he definitely, traded away Geno, got a pick, DK got a pick, right? He also inversely did not pay for those salaries, so that's a bonus. So we free up cap space, we add draft picks, and we sign some good players on defense. 3 really good players on defense, which that's great. But our weakest part of the team, we have not addressed yet. So it's like, if he was able to hit one of those dudes that the Bears took, or, just Fries or whatever, if you'd gotten one of those guys, to me it immediately goes to an A. Because it's like, all right, you said you were going to upgrade the line, and if we're being optimistic, you have now like 3 to 4 pieces for the O-line. Well, you haven't done that. So the ceiling of the team is limited at this point. Even with the defense, you can have a top 10 defense, but what are we going to have on offense with the current O-line we have?
Yeah.
Top 20.
Yeah.
That's the ceiling. in my
grade
opinion.
that they are getting right now could change, but we just don't know yet, right? Like, right now it's a B at best,
It's ongoing
because
but
it's ongoing. Yeah.
And to compete in this division, honestly, it's against the Rams, I think, at this
Yeah.
point. And their strength right now is their young D-line. And Sam Darnold and his pressure rate, like what his decision-making between being pressured versus not being pressured is a big difference.
yeah.
And that's what's going to make or break us actually competing in this division. We can make all these awesome moves, and I do think like we've made all these other encompassing moves. Like literally, it's just the O-line. I'm freaking out over the last decade because of the O-line.
Yeah. So I guess I should take it so far with the moves they've made this offseason. We thought, I mean, it's been a major shakeup,
Yeah,
right? It's been Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Geno Smith are gone. Bunch of other people not brought back, but role players mostly. There was slight speculation that from national media and many other people that, oh man, it's a rebuild. It's going on. They're tearing it down. And for any of us, would we think it's a rebuild at this point?
No.
I
not right now.
think
Because
we
we
might
watched
say it's a
them,
retool.
and we knew where Tyler Lockett was at in his career.
Yeah.
We knew where Geno Smith was at in his career and what the next contract would look like. So,
Yeah.
the defense we saw what was happening at the end of the year.
So are they competing this year or trying to build a roster that will compete this year?
With
Yeah.
the signing of Sam Darnold and these other pieces, yes. Yeah.
Even if they know they're probably not the true Super Bowl contender this year,
Yes.
they're building it to be
Yep.
a current this year or next year
I think so.
contender. Okay. Then let's end this segment, kind of move into the present and the future, if you will, because I think we're all ready to talk about the O-line. Draft is our favorite holiday in this season. So let's do
Coming up
that.
next.
Coming up next. Yahoo. All right, quick breakdown. We got a lot to talk about still. Let's get the elephant in the room that isn't that big because we didn't draft him very high and he didn't work out very well. Out of the way. The offensive
elephant?
line.
LJ Collier.
Oluwatimi?
Oluwatimi. The offensive line that's actually offensive. So we've got Charles Cross,
Yeah.
above average. Yes?
He was the
Agreed.
best left tackle in that draft.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
And he was drafted
was-
after.
I
I
was
wanted
saying-
Evan Neal. Yeah, I
Oh,
remember
Van
that.
Neal. Oh.
I wanted
Just
Evan
signed
Neal.
it, or I
wanted
He didn't
Icky.
work. Yeah, you wanted
I
Icky.
wanted
Come on.
Icky.
And Abe Lucas, who fell to the third round due to injury predictions, which have come true.
Yep.
But honestly, like when he's on the field, he's awesome.
Very good.
He's clearly a first round talent when he's on the field. And then we have everyone else that rotates and rotates and rotates and rotates, and it's endless. So let's talk, let's rant, let's take 5 minutes and just destroy whatever we want to before we move on with our lives. So what's the issue with the offensive line? What's the issue with John Schneider? What's the issue with all the issues, boys?
The issue is with the man taking the players. He's shown he cannot draft offensive linemen for years. Doesn't matter who the coach is, who the head coach is, who the offensive coordinator is, who the run game coordinator is, whatever. They can't do it. They cannot do it. It's so frustrating sitting as a fan up there in section 318 or wherever I'm at and watching them get destroyed. So it falls with John Schneider. That's my opinion. It's not player development or anything else. There is no development. And, yeah. Casey?
Developers.
Developers?
Developers. Yeah, there is no development, and I think that's the problem too. That we're trying to draft these O linemen and put them into the situations early that they're supposed to be in a development situation, and we're putting too much on these guys too soon, and that's what these other teams like the Eagles, like the Chiefs, like these other teams that are willing to pay for these guards. 1 to 2 year deals, nothing crazy, unless they are like a true veteran and like, okay, we would like you on the team longer. But I mean, look at the seamless transition that the Eagles have had with Jason Kelsey leaving and their new center. It's like
Very good point.
it's just we're not getting the opportunities to develop these young guys behind even just a 1 year deal with an above average guard, and we won't even sign that. Like, what's the deal with that? What's the deal?
Well, that was the situation we were in last year with the center,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I was like, oh, crap, Oluwatimi's not good. Again, what do we got to do?
Yeah.
Oh, let's sign this guy. He's not been signed by anyone because he had a very serious injury.
Yeah.
And it didn't work out, But still, they were in such a bind because they keep drafting guys that don't work out that they're in this place of like, uh-oh, we got to do something like now. Or we just need to throw Anthony Bradford in and hope that he can do it. And when he's not good, it's like, well, what did you expect? He was a 5th round draft pick.
Yeah.
Like,
So what's the biggest lesson you guys learned from the roster building of these very, like literally last month, Super Bowl teams? What's the biggest lesson you learned in roster building from those two clear cornerstone guys who they've been going for a while?
but cornerstone guys as far as like the Chiefs versus the Eagles?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
The
Well,
Lions have entered that conversation. I
Yeah,
think.
There's
yeah,
elements
there's
of
a
that.
couple of top teams up there.
Ravens.
I mean, the Chiefs are clearly built around a generational quarterback.
Yes.
And in addition, they've also drafted well, right? They drafted the center that we wanted. That's happened more than once. The Eagles are the opposite. They are just best player available, hitting on a crazy high amount of players in the draft and or trading for the correct guys. So two different philosophies. The Eagles just had the ridiculously strong team. In the same way that the Seahawks had such a good team when they won the Super Bowl and was going to the Super Bowl. Same kind of thing. So very different philosophies, and yet the positional or the foundational positions that we talk about, or rather I can say I talk about, quarterback, offensive line, defensive line, both teams have been outstanding at. And the Eagles just happen to have more studs in this particular draft, or in this particular matchup, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, the Eagles are willing to take the risk on some of these players like Jalen Carter, like Cooper DeJean, like injury risk too, along with that. And they're hitting on these guys that are studs. And there could be a little bit of risk of them, but at the same time, they've been able to afford it because of their early on draft hits and successes as well. We just have not fortified at the line like we should have been doing all along. And ever since we've seen with Dan Campbell, he's been enforcing that in the trenches, and we've been able to see him build out now, being able to use a first-round pick on a running back who's now terrorizing the league in the backfield, and because of the success of his own line.
So this is maybe that conversation around the things that we've pointed out so far in the last month and a half, right, since Super Bowl time, that the Eagles literally paid almost all of their offensive starters, not top 5 money at their position, but frequently top 10 to 15 money at their position.
Yeah.
They also, on the flip side, didn't do that at hardly any defensive positions. They had one starter. You can double check me on that if you want. One defensive starter, like across their whole team, that was paid a top 15 at their position. And that's just, all that free agency money, all the big extension money, all the big trade for capital happened on offense, while the free agency signings that were under the surface were on defense. The big draft capital was on defense, right? So now you have this philosophy that was clear, cut, and this is how they built it. Now, the Eagles org also has some money things they're doing that are allowing them to do this, right?
Yep.
It's not a top 15 contract because they added 4 void years at the end and split the cap evenly across all those years. So whether
they're
the
in their
player's
window
there
right
or
now,
not,
right? So
yeah.
that's, yep.
But also the cap is going up 20% a year.
Yeah.
So
they're smart.
who cares?
Yep.
Right? Like that's one of those question marks of, unless there's another COVID year or something, they just don't care. They'll have money at that time. We've said before, we don't think the Seahawks should ever have a money excuse from like cash on hand.
Yeah.
So is there a conversation to be had not just about John Schneider, but also ownership influence, right? Like in how that impacts John's movements or Pete's movements back in the day, or how the org functions, why 3-year contracts are all we give out with only 2 years guaranteed. Are there discussions to be had about ownership as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very fair. We have discussions, rightfully so, about the Mariners all the time, just blasting them for not going after hitters, for this window they have, for not being true to their word. And it is kind of interesting how the same has not happened for the Allens, right? And part of that, I think, is because what Paul Allen did for the Seahawks. They were in buses. They literally packed up. They were going to be training in California the year that Paul Allen stepped in, bought the team, right? He helped fund that stadium. I mean, he really did literally save the franchise.
Yeah.
And so, and he helped us get to 3 Super Bowls, and he brought in 2 Hall of Fame head coaches, and then he passed away. And so I think it's this awkward place of, we don't know Vulcan Sports, basically, how that's been broken down. It's a massive trust. I mean, the Allen Foundation, or Paul Allen himself, he could have bought the NFL and all the teams at any point. I mean, the amount of wealth he had was so much higher than any of the other owners, not even close. And so now we're at this point where we just don't know. When do we see Jody Allen? We see him around draft time. That's it. And it goes back to, I think, the player rankings, right? At the end of the season, there's these rankings. They go after facility and families and all this stuff. And where was the Seahawks? It was 26, I believe. 20. What?
For which category? I forget.
It's
which
just
one.
overall. I thought it was 20. They were the 26th.
I don't think they were 26th overall.
Yeah, they were in like the teens overall.
I think they were still 17th.
Yeah.
Maybe it was 20. Maybe it was the owner. I'm specifically, because there is a ranking on the owner.
They ranked the ownership
So
at like a C.
that's the number that I'm thinking of. I believe it's 26, and I don't blame them, because it's like we see her once a year. I mean, I know like she's probably around more than that because she's in the building or whatever. Like, we're fans, but we only see her once a year. And Paul Allen was very present. He was not meddling in stuff, but he was present. He was well liked. I mean, it's well documented how much Marshawn Lynch loved Paul Allen.
Yeah.
So, ownership, fabulous point to bring up, is that they are not talked about because they're kind of protected. It's kind of, like a holy group there that we don't want to talk about. We don't want to, because of everything that's happened.
Well,
but
I don't know if it's so much we can't talk about them as much as we just don't know much about
that's
this
the other
right
side
now.
of it.
Because
we
Paul,
don't
we
know.
talked about
yeah,
in a positive light.
Yeah.
But we talked about him. Do we talk about current ownership that much? Actually,
talk
compare
about
and
it being
contrast.
sold
Yeah.
pretty soon, and that's going to change things.
So compare and contrast, because we talk about Mariners ownership
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Well, we don't have 17 part owners or however many. I think it's over 20 now. So at least we have somebody steering the ship and making, okay, I'm making this decision and I'm going to die with this decision versus disputing amongst the back. And then, yeah, we have one guy that's sitting here or taking all the flack. But I think in reality, too, like going back to your earlier point, the Eagles, they're only paying two guys right now on the defense top money, and they're linebackers, over $50 million each, and they're like that's like in the top for comparison to the league. That's it. That's all they're paying on defense. So it's kind of seeing now this transition from what the defenses used to be back in 2010 to 2018, 19. To now we're seeing it back go to offensive ball again, like really developing around the quarterback.
Developers.
You're seeing Jalen Hurts have more success, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, seeing these guys be successful with good offenses. And we just have not figured that out on our end now, how to transition ever since that second Super Bowl and over the past decade, again, having not an efficient offense. We're constantly wondering, when is this offense going to start clicking? When was Russell going to start clicking? With still having Marshawn Lynch for a couple more years. When was Geno going to click with still having Geno and then JSN, and still having Lockett on the field? It didn't matter because we just did not have the supporting cast and willing to pay that to support them.
Well, Daniel, you've talked about this quite a bit, is the always compete model, right? And this is the kind of like behind closed doors, we don't really know what conversation's happening. But you've mentioned how we wonder if that mantra has changed from Pete Carroll's always compete to we always compete as an org, being translated as we don't lose. Mm-hmm. We don't win everything, but we don't lose. That's the always compete. So we're never rebuilding. I mean, what do you think about that? Is that true? That's just something you've mentioned many times?
That's been maybe a soapbox for me. Is I hear Pete Carroll say always compete. We all watched it. We watched how he always competed until he had a roster set of guys that was awesome and no one could beat out. And so off you go, right? Like he lost the college football coaching tree where he knew every single player and he had played against all of them. And then always compete meant what? That he from that point onwards, again, Pete Carroll is incredible. No harshing Pete Carroll's vibes at all. It's literally just always compete eventually meant in terms of the product on the field. We don't have losing seasons. We're not a bad org. That doesn't necessarily make you a Super Bowl contender by any standard or an NFC championship contender by any standard. I remember watching the Dallas playoff game at your apartment in South Seattle and going like, what is this?
Yeah.
What is this? There's no chance.
22-24 loss
against
something like that.
Dallas.
Yeah.
We were manhandled by a team we love to make fun of in that one game.
Yeah.
Yep.
And by the way, they totally deserve to be made fun of. We should continue to make fun of them. They're terrible.
They'll never win a Super Bowl.
They'll never win a Super Bowl.
Go D-Lo.
Go to Marcus Lawrence. But at the same time, like since that point as well, it was like we hardly made the playoffs. And when we did we really have a chance? Did it feel like we were not just wild card seed slipped in by some type of schedule thing? The always compete mantra turned into what product do we have on the field? We don't really lose.
Sounds like the Mariners.
And that's not a product we enjoy.
No.
That's a product that is hard to enjoy. It's hard to be excited about another 9-8 season.
Yeah.
Or 10-7 season.
Oh, we just missed the playoffs.
Oh man, if only we had
It's very disheartening.
We're right there, fans. Just hang on a little bit longer.
I think a lot of
have
the
a good
passionate.
roster.
Oh man, I think a lot of the passionate Seahawks fans. I'm just not certain we care about having a wild card appearance, because unless you slipped into the wild card, but really it was because you and the Rams are both Super Bowl contenders, and only one could get that slot. Unless that's the case, who cares?
Yeah.
Right? Like, be great or be terrible.
Yeah.
But the lukewarm stuff is just hard to watch. So always compete. If it is translated in a way that means, well, we have to maintain a winning culture. But that winning culture really just means we don't lose. Like, that's what winning culture means. Then we're the Steelers. And the Steelers have no chance of winning a Super Bowl and haven't for years.
And they're paying DK $33
And
million.
they're paying DK $33 million. Thank you.
That is funny.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think there's natural progressions that happen in life, and this happens in sports as well. And in college, you see the turnaround happen like every year.
Yeah.
But it also can be like 3 to 4 years. Like you'll have a team that's growing. There's a bunch of red shirts or whatever, and there's like a 3 to 4 window where they're really good, and then all the guys graduate, and that's it. And so that's what Pete did while he was at USC, as any college coach does. And then coming to the pros, it's like, okay, so you drafted these studs, you drafted Earl Thomas, and then you sign into a contract, and that's the always compete. Okay, well they are competing. They're dogs. They're competing in practice every day. So like on some level that's still working. But from a roster perspective, it isn't. And the natural life cycle of an NFL team is that we talk about windows. Like, it's a real thing. A team is really good for a small window for a couple of years, and then they fall off. They have to, because they pay people. Those people get old. They don't draft well, whatever. That's how it works. And so the Seahawks being on one side, it's good because it's like we've not watched a 4-win team since 2009 with Jim Moore. That's the last time we were truly bad. Like, like this is not good. This is hard to watch. And at the same time, because we've been good enough, 7 wins is the floor. It doesn't allow you to get those blue chip guys. It doesn't allow you to turn around your roster. And so, yeah, it's stuck in that mode. It's a scary proposition, and that's what ownership is saying. And we just don't know because we don't hear from ownership, and we don't really hear from John Schneider that much.
And this is just maybe a cap on that stuff so we can talk a little draft. But the old leadership adage of your organization is perfectly set up to get the results it gets. Right? It's perfectly set up to get whatever results it gets. Right? You have set it up successfully in that regard.
Yep.
Right? If your organization is falling apart, you have set it perfectly to fall apart. Right? If your organization is selling the most commercial product ever and is expanding and building, and now it's named Amazon Smile or Amazon Prime, and now we're rebranding into Prime, well, your organization was perfectly set up to attain that. Right? Like, whatever happens, you set it up for that. In general, like, that's the responsibility-taking piece of leadership. I set it up for that result.
Well, I feel like that's what John Schneider is doing, especially with all these signings we just talked about. I feel like John Schneider might be seeing his own writing on the wall in that sense. Like, these are going to either be really successful moves, or it could be actually the end of it where, okay, I've gotten the most draft capital I've had in the last several years, and I have to do something with it along with having success with these older but successful former players, or still players. We'll see what happens.
So let's talk draft for 5 minutes real fast. Let's get through some fun draft talk. We'll talk way more draft in the next month and a half, right? Way more. And PFF just today updated their rankings so that all our actual draft picks, right? The 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 7, 7. Yes?
Yes.
Are all correctly updated with the correct numbers and everything. So you can kind of mock away as you will. I also do a lot of nerd data stuff, so I've compiled a lot of data into sheets with different things and
Thank
the
you, Daniel.
basics. You're welcome. Composite data includes 3 things: PFF rankings from a scouting organization. It includes NGS scores, which is a predictive metric used by Next Gen Stats. That's an NFL branded and endorsed one. And then RAS scores, relative athletic score. That's relative to their own position over time. What percentile are they in the course of time? So if they score a 10 out of 10, that means they are the 100th percentile. They're literally the top 1 or 2 at their position all time in terms of athleticism. That's based on combine stuff. So let's talk draft for a second. I think we all want some O-line. We've got 5 picks in day 1 and 2. How many O-line do you want? How many D-line do you want? What positions do you actually want?
Well, and
Quick
just
hitters.
to remind, we pick at 18, 50, 52, 82, 92, 137, 172, 175, 223, and 234. So those are the picks. What do you think, Casey? What should we do?
I want at least 3 O-linemen
In the
those
first
5
2
picks.
days.
Yes.
I want at
Yes.
least 3. If we don't draft any guards, I want 5.
We could literally draft our whole O-line.
I would love to draft our
Be
whole
the first
O-line
team to ever do it in
and
the
then
history
see
of NFL.
them all not be developed.
Developers.
I think the one guy I've been really high on, and Daniel knows this, is my boy Jared Wilson from Georgia. Those 2 Georgia inside O-linemen are insane. Tate Ratledge and Jared Wilson. But Jared Wilson being their center, he's a day one starter for center. Like, this guy's gonna be an NFL starter anywhere he goes. I feel like, barring he doesn't go to a winning team, and that the Eagles can take advantage of just picking up another great pick. But this guy has great lateral agility. He's able to pass protect very well, and he's mauler when he gets downfield.
97th percentile athlete?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's
The freak.
this guy has a ton of pancakes. He can mess with people at all levels. I think the thing they were kind of giving him mid scores on was actually his arm length. Which Jason Kelsey actually struggled with sometimes with some of these shorter O-linemen. We heard that on his podcast recently.
It's true.
With Poona Ford. Poona Ford had longer arms than Jason Kelsey.
Yep. Random thing I did not expect.
Random thing, and Poona Ford was able to own him. But at that same time, I mean, if that's the only knock against him, and along with some run blocking issues, I think I'm okay with that.
So the 2 things I would bring up from a broad perspective on the O-line in this draft is, so far, every report we get from live combine attendees is that the tackles project to be NFL guards or centers. They're
Fantastic.
right, which works for us. This is awesome. But it's so straightforward.
Yeah.
The tackles, this is a bad tackle draft. If you needed tackles, I'm so thankful we have Cross and Lucas on the
We
roster.
have 2 tackles.
I am so thankful because we could draft tackles here, and I immediately know, yep, those are guards or center or whatever. The second thing I would point out really quickly is that a lot of people are talking about Tyler Booker. Tyler Booker being the top-ranked guard in the PFF
Alabama.
system from Alabama.
Took him in
and
Madden.
we've talked about that at 18. We've talked about that other places. And the one thing to point out is, again, it's if you're into draft Twitter, you'll see it every time, and it's just he's not that great of an athlete from the core elements. He's like a 34th, 37th percentile athlete.
Very non-athletic.
That's not his thing. He is, however, a scary human to face. Put him one-on-one and watch him destroy someone's family and life in front of their eyes. It's
We
just
like
incredible.
that in football.
We like that in football, but it doesn't work well in a zone blocking scheme where you have to run, pull, move. It works well in a gap scheme.
Yep.
It works well in a one-on-one setting. It doesn't work as great in those other things. So I think there's going to be an element of scheme specificity there. I think he's got a chance to fall into the late first, early second. I'm not saying that's likely, but I think it's possible. So I would just quickly pose that I love Tyler Booker. I think we all like Tyler Booker. We'll get into his film a little bit more over the next month and a half, but you're going to love his film. Does it translate to the NFL in a zone scheme? I think the answer will end up being not as well as we wish.
Yeah, and we know that we look at like PFF's board or whatever board you want to look at, and people are like, these are the top 100 players, and those are likely wildly different from what a team has, which teams are just so scheme specific, in my opinion. There's a good chance that he is the best player on the board at 18, and we're like, no, he doesn't fit us.
Yeah.
Like, we've done that before many times in the first round.
Yeah.
It's like, what are we doing? Why are we not taking this guy? And they'll be like, they'll never say, like, oh, Tyler Booker was not a scheme fit. But, like, that's the only reason. Like, he's there. He's good. Like, he's got deficits for sure, but he's, like, the best interior there. So I could see a situation like that happening. Is there any particular guards, maybe I'll throw this to you, Daniel, any particular guards that stand out to you that might be a scheme fit that could be there at 18?
So we'll tag the center from Georgia
Okay.
as Jared Wilson. And here's a moment of irony, because we're not going to discuss today tackles translating to guards. I haven't done that film study yet. There's 2 other guards from Georgia.
so
There's an entire interior O-line from Georgia. And if you told me today that we walked out of those first 5 selections we have in the first day 1 and 2,
Draft
that we
all of
walked
them.
out with all of Georgia's interior O-line, I would be thrilled. I'm telling you that all 3 of them are 90-plus percentile athletes, according to RIS. They've got decent NGS scores from Next Gen Stats, if not great. And they're on PFF's rankings and radar. I don't have much else to go on today, but if you told me today we're walking out with those 3 guys, that's a major upgrade.
You'd be happy.
Yeah, ecstatic.
So it sounds like we're going to have to continue this talk like in another one. But where we're at right now is we did not sign any big names, basically free agency period to start. There's still some guys out there.
From the O-line.
From the O-line. Okay. But most likely at this point, we are looking towards more of the veteran signing / drafting guards or interior O-line. So how does that sit with you guys real quick?
We draft 2 on the first 2 days, and we get 2 veterans. How do you feel?
I'm moderately happy.
Okay. We get 2 veterans and 3 in the first 5 picks.
I'm ecstatic.
Any less than 2 veterans and 2 in the first 5 picks.
Set
and
us
I
up
agree.
to where we're entering the Super Bowl window in this next 2 years.
I think we're all ready.
Because that's what we have the potential to do.
Make it happen, John.
Oh man, John. Come on, John. We got to do some more draft talk here soon, guys.
do it.
Let's dive into this stuff. I'll finish my scouting reports on linebackers here soon, and then I'll send that out to you. Developers. All right, boys. Any other last quick comments, quandaries, calamities, conundrums, catastrophes?
All right, let's go.
Okay, let's go.
Bye.
Bye. Developers.